Welcome, everyone, to the second episode of Monitor Keeping Podcast.
How's
I'm
it going,
Alan.
everybody?
Here's
This is Kai here.
And today we're going to get into talking about diet for our second show. Something that's immensely important to reproduction, to keeping, and overall health of the animals. And Kai, from what I understand, just from talking to you and all the phone calls, you've actually kind of experimented with quite a bit of foods for your animals.
Yeah. Over the years, just experimenting better diets, or just tried stuff that people are, kind of just putting out there as what they do themselves and seeing if it works for my animals. Some stuff does work. Some stuff I don't find to be that pleasing or appealing to when they're eating it or after they've eaten it. Yeah. But for the most part, I've tried quite a few different things. In this podcast, I kind of want to go over just for everybody, from the beginners that just got their savannas or just got their now monitors or their small water monitors or anything like that, and then even to the guys that are doing breeding or not really getting it with eggs, or maybe the eggs aren't coming out in such great conditions or something like that. Even also the bounce back on females, the diet is also important. And so, I would say there isn't one way to feed your monitors correctly. There are quite a few ways, and ways that essentially what I mean by correctly is like what ways that are working and beneficial, essentially. Not everybody uses the same exact diet and still are achieving successes in many different rates. So, I just want to kind of touch up on that, not to be kind of pinning one thing as the only way to feed, but there's a wide range of what is a good possibility on a proper diet. And it's a balance of a little bit of both, kind of just like us. We indulge in some of the bad stuff for us too, but there's also the much more proper diet and something that you should kind of eat more regularly. And
Great
so these
point.
animals, they really benefit from them. To really get to start as far as like baby animals, I really don't pound all my baby animals, and what I mean by that is I don't feed them every day, and I don't stuff them to the brim. I kind of just feed them enough. I kind of get an idea on what they eat in one meal, and give them just about that amount, not to the point where they're like so bloated and have a huge distended belly, but just enough to keep them maintained and everything like that. So roughly around 3 to 4 times a week I'll feed them, maybe skip a day. Sometimes it really just depends. Like if I fed really heavy one day, I might skip 2 days or something like that. And the diet for me, some people recommend you feed like baby monitors, just like insects or small little prey items. I really do believe that you are underestimating what your little monitors can handle as small ones. I know the little insects and stuff like that are good. They are beneficial. They give a bit of a trigger. They are good to chase, but your little monitor, he can basically eat small vertebrates from the time they're born.
Absolutely.
Little tiny lizards, little frogs. Now, we don't really have those in abundance in the hobby, so you can still chop up chicks and mice and quail and use things like that, where you're taking what you would feed an adult animal, but you're mincing it up, cutting it up into little small fragments of itself, and essentially giving that in a platter to your lizard. For me, I find that they eat a little bit better and they eat a little bit more when the bite-sized pieces easily fit into their mouth, instead of having like a huge hunk that they have to sit there, take the time to swallow, not really choke on or anything like that. It's just too big of mouthfuls. And so, yeah, I really feed the little babies just stuff like that. I don't really do a whole insect stage where I feed a ton of bugs for several months, and then I introduced them to rodents. It's kind of insects, chopped rodents, chopped chicks, chopped shrimp, fish, is whatever is a food item for the big animals, just minced up for the small guys, and
Now, with
that
some of
way.
your that sorry to interrupt you, but with that shrimp that you mentioned, are you feeding with the shells and everything attached,
Yeah.
or?
Now the things that I avoid when I use seafood is I avoid the barbs. So
Hmm.
I'll snip off the tip barb and I snip off the head barb that they have. And then when I get like fish like bluegill or anything that's got a fin, I snip off that barb. Even like if I'm feeding crappy goldfish or anything that has pectoral barbs, I'll snip those off too. Um, and basically just make it so when they do eat it, there's no sharp barb poking them.
Right.
And I feed just about the whole shell and everything like that. It comes with the head and the guts and all that. I try to use all that stuff in a meal. It's if you were to remove the shell, you'd be removing the calcium.
Yeah.
So yeah, you want to stay on top of that a little bit. Um, now, as far as you know, using calcium for your animals too, I supplement pretty good amount. Maybe 80-90% of the meals. I would say I skip only one day out of the week or so that I don't really use a ton of calcium. And then like if I'm using pinkies and fuzzies that are really just meat, it's not a ton of calcium developed yet in the bones. I use I definitely use calcium dust on those guys as well, just to amplify the food and give it more sustenance in it for them.
Now, when you're doing your supplements, are you using calcium plain or calcium with D3? What do you use?
I have both, and I use the D3 much more. There are a couple days where I have the ones without D3, um, and it's a little balance between both. There isn't no like magic ratio or anything like that. It's just a couple days out of the week or a few days out of the month. I'll use the just plain calcium. The current product that I have always really used over the years is the Mineral product. It's like a sticky. It's by Sticky Tongue, and it's called Mineral, or I believe vice versa or something like that. But it's Sticky Tongue Mineral with D3. That's the yellow container, and then I have Sticky Tongue Mineral without D3. That's the red container. Yeah, I use those quite frequently. I do have like a Repcal that I also have on the side whenever I'm out of the D3 in Mineral, but I don't use that one that often. Um, I have no idea. It's just the way the animals take to the mineral a little bit better. I can kind of almost cake on or put a good amount of it on, and the animals
Hmm.
don't mind, but the other one not so much. It's like they don't like the taste or something like that. So yeah, that's what I kind of do for supplementation. Now, there's also parts of the diet where I use fillers. Not to be like cheating and everything like that, or say that I don't condone kind of using some fillers. But hey, man, you're not gonna always be able to afford like some crazy expensive meals for your animals all the time, or you
Right.
kind of just cut some costs a little bit and still use something that is beneficial. Now, I don't recommend you just use like hot dogs or anything like that at all. Don't use hot dog and dog food. My fillers are still on the baseline of somewhat healthy. I have this thing called Missouri Croc Diet, and
Yeah.
that broken down is essentially really good for our carnivorous diet. And so I mix that with egg. I mix that with ground turkey that I use, the 2% ground turkey that I use, and anything that's a real filler that is essentially not a whole ton of nutrients in it. I add nutrients back into it with by using that Missouri Croc Diet. There isn't any major ratio that I use. I just kind of get a handful in my palm and of both. I kind of soak up the Missouri a little bit, let it break down, and then I mash it all together with the turkey balls and maybe throw in a little bit of calcium on top, and that's my filler diet. I
I
use
like it.
that. Yeah, I use that maybe like twice a month though. I don't use it very often. The reason I don't use it very often is because it kind of leaves the poop a little runny.
Hmm.
There isn't a whole lot in it as far as binding and keeping it together while it's being digested. It's literally just pellets that turns into powder for me, and then I add that to the ground turkey, which really isn't anything other than just meat. So, as far as digestion goes, there's nothing holding it together when it poops. So when the animal poops, it's really just nasty splatter, and
Right.
that's that part that I was telling you about, the where I don't like it when it comes out. It's less appealing.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's a reason why I don't use it that often, because the next couple of days, shits are really horrible, really runny. The animal is perfectly fine. It's just the stool is very loose, and so um, the fur and feather and bone and all that gut content kind of keep things together as being digested. So
It's
um,
funny. I've gotten a little creative with some of those, like talking about fillers. And yes, I use fillers also in different applications. They work for me. And I mean, over 2020, sometimes trying to find food was pretty difficult. I'm sure other people out there had the same issues. So it was
yeah,
kind of it was surviving to a certain extent. Um, but some of the things I've done with different filler items, say chicken hearts and gizzards I've used before,
yeah,
um, is actually creating my own little egg dip, you could say, and
yeah.
then applying the calcium that way because there's no bone content in that, and so applying the calcium, and then you could even do dried mealworms stuck on the like from a chick feed store or a supply store.
Yeah.
You can buy those bags full of dried mealworms and roll those items around in that, and yeah, it gets a little gross, but it
Right.
definitely works.
It's a weird concoction of stuff that we think would go well, and it's what it is it's just thinking outside the box a little bit. It's kind of like when a green tree python has, I mean, the keeper has a hard time feeding little babies and they brain them, or we're
Right.
adding fish and frog juice to amphibian eaters, and it's just some monitors, like what it is when you hold a piece of food item up to them and they don't really get triggered by it, but when it when they tongue flick it and it's like egg yolk or a bloody mess or guts and stuff, it's like a trigger. So um, I've had animals where I fed them a piece of item that wasn't dipped in some crazy bloody egg yolk, and they didn't really go for it. But once I got that egg yolk on their lips, they started to basically eat.
Right.
Some animals that are really tricky, or females that they don't want to eat in front of you, or I don't know, it's just an animal that's kind of being lethargic a little bit. It really works out. So that trigger is kind of what we want some people to use if they're having some issues. You know, it's a good thing to kind of just have in the back of your mind, like, all right, I'm having, let's say you get in an import or you get in an animal that is quite difficult to work with as far as getting it to eat, right?
Hmm.
Um, Letting it be comfortable settling in is one thing, and then offering the right foods at its comfortable time, or when it's like coming out to bask and then getting ready to eat. Those are when you want to really introduce food and get somewhat of a response out of your animal. I mean, sometimes they'll also be real jerks and they won't respond at all. They'll just tuck away and you kind of lose your chance. But there are animals that, hey, they're hungry, and that's another reason why I don't feed every day, is because they're not really wanting to eat that much all the time, especially little babies. When you're stuffing them and stuffing them and stuffing them, there are days where they need a break, and um, you know, it's a good thing to kind of keep in mind where you're just not overstuffing them.
I think there's also something to mention with the babies, especially that you can actually keep them at some higher ambient temps and a higher bath. Now, for the most part, I give my babies somewhere around 120 to 130 as a basking spot, but you can higher or raise the temps both in the basking spot and the ambient. And while they're hitting that initial few phases of growth, you can pound them full of food, but you need to supply the heat so that they can use that
Digest
heat,
well. Yeah.
yeah, to digest. But during that time, it's something you can do. Something I think that happens a lot just during the time that they're born in nature and getting those, that first trying to get some size on themselves, basically for survival. But in captivity, we can slow that down a little bit and kind of,
Speed
use
it
it
up,
to our advantage.
manipulate.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, we can.
manipulate it a little bit.
Yep. But you mentioned that for the most part with babies, you pretty much simulate the same diet as the adults, right?
Yeah, very much so. Just cut down in the size. It's really much it. I mean, there
Yeah.
are items that the little guys can't eat at all. Like even rat pieces cut down in size, they really can't eat. But like all the mice and all the chicks, I can cut down to really small minced sizes because the bone's easier to cut and there's not a lot of mass hair.
Right.
Yeah. And I was
Now,
like, what were you saying?
I was going to ask, do you offer babies multiple food items as they're still real young to get them eating different things?
Yeah, I do. Only because that's what I do normally, anyways. Um, just to kind of get them onto different things, and really, so when they do go to somebody else, they're already kind of equipped, well-rounded, well-balanced, and the customer can kind of just feed whatever, and that
Right.
animal would be already hip to it and ready to go. I used to use just like chopped mice, egg, and some smelt fish. But I've added some more stuff like ground turkey because I know people like to use that a little bit, and some. I have a plate of chicken hearts that I use once in a while, but mostly, man, I kind of just I'll use the midsection of a chick, and I'll cut the legs into
Mm-hmm.
little pieces. Yeah, um, and really they all kind of get the same thing now. Um, so yeah, I do a really well balanced diet for them. And again, I do skip quite a bit. So there's some days of the week that there's 2 or 3 days that they don't eat at all. Um, you know, even like the Kimberleys that I have,
Yeah.
they are they're eating. I'd say every 2 days, maybe every other day if I was using bugs the day before. Um, but not so much of like, all right, I'm gonna feed you a ton of. I'm just not just gonna put a whole heaping bowl in there or anything like that. It's really just what I fit in like a jar cap, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I have
Now,
to be honest. Right now, I'm on vacation, so I'm doing this
yeah,
from a hotel room. But leaving all the animals at home, I'm a little apprehensive. I had to come up with some, different ideas while leaving them. For some, I just turned off the lights, and that'll
yeah,
slow them down.
right.
For some of the young ones, I
It's the
actually,
babies. It's the
yeah,
critical babies. Yeah, that's why I couldn't leave. I mean, even a day or so, I couldn't leave. Like I can hook everything up to timers, everything will be good, but in the back of my head, I'm just like, all right, I got these expensive ass things at home. I just don't want them to die, and there's things riding on them, and um, obviously, there's backup plans and all that stuff, but you can never always be too sure sometimes, and um, things happen, and even when you rely on some other people, they're not seeing it how you are. They're just going
right,
by your little descriptions. Hey, do this, do that, but like what you're thinking about in the back of your head's like, man, that I don't know, that thing wasn't doing too hot last week, so I hope it does well
right.
this week, right?
What I ended up doing with a lot of the young ones was I actually, and I haven't done this before, but I separated them into their own containers and put them in the incubator at about 86 degrees. So this is only going to be for a week,
Yeah,
and I'm hoping it works out. I think it will work out just fine, unless they're just going to straight die from hunger. There's plenty of moisture in there.
yeah,
Nothing went in there in bad condition or dehydrated, anything like that. So
right.
if anything, they're just going to be hungry when I get back. So, um, yeah, I'm a little apprehensive, but I'm not going to let it take away from enjoying the finer things in life either. But I'll
Yeah.
let everybody know how it worked.
Now, really like going into some more, I guess, just schedules of feeding. Now, getting into like juveniles and then even sub adults, I feed those guys a lot differently. They're getting bigger chunks of food.
Hmm.
I'm not really mincing things up anymore, and they're able to kind of pound a little bit, only because they've gotten some more size to them, and now their guts a little bit bigger. But they still go through a thing where it's only being fed just enough, let you digest, let your tummy get down to size back where you can see the lateral folds and stuff again. And that's what I kind of look for. And then, not to be manipulating them with food, but I kind of do that where I starve them a little bit or make them get hungry again, where they're going to
Yeah.
come to the front of the glass, and the coming up to the front of the glass gives me now essentially the power over them, where I'm the food giver. They know that they're going to be coming to me, and what I'm doing is now using that as positive interaction and essentially getting them to trust me as the food giver for one. And from there, I can use that manipulating thing and really just get them to crawl on my arm, or even just take food from the tongs, where all right, they're going to be used to this. And so I get them used to this, and really now the animal is a juvenile getting to sub-adult. I'm building this bond with them as they're getting more bold. They've got some size onto them. They're eating off the tongs a little bit more. Like the babies, I don't force that on them. I really just let them kind of do their own thing, because what I keep my baby monitors, Kimberleys and mangroves, they're frantic animals.
Yeah.
Baby Kimberleys are just spastastic, where they're just going to dart from one part of the cage to the next in half a second. My mangroves, not only are they slower growers, they are kept a little bit cooler. Just that's the way they like their temperatures, and really they're not incredibly like, oh, just hounding food like what you would see in a really heated water monitor, or like a
Yeah.
Nile monitor, or a white throat or a black throat, where those guys basically double in size overnight, so to speak. Where they're just getting so big. These mangroves are just taking their time a little bit more. Um, and so yeah, I really don't do a ton when they're really little. Now, getting into that whole building trust and everything like that again with them, utilizing that in my convenience, or for my convenience, as having a pet, or even getting them to be bonded and essentially worked with, imprinted essentially, right? And so they're now hooked to a certain sort of routine, being tongue fed. Now, I know this
You are
is
the food god
yeah,
in
you're the
their
food
life.
guy. Yeah, so now those are for like my juveniles. I kind of just, you can feed them a little bit more, kind of go a little bit more heavy on them, just because they're a little bit more bigger. They can pound it. But once we get to like now adults, and even males, right? We're no longer doing that pounding. So
Right.
I'm now, what it is I have so many different, because I have a lot of lizards, right? I have very many feeding schedules going through my head. Even if I have a kind of set schedule where I feed a few different days, that changes when things are locking up, or things are going through vitellogenesis, or females are laying. It just changes, right? It changes all the time. And I now am much more what you would call strict on the adult's diet. The male is not going to be fed till he just wants to stop. He's actually just getting fed enough where he's lean. I need him to have sex and be healthy, and essentially be a guy that he's in his prime. I don't want him to be sluggish or anything like that. And so my diet for the adults now changes again. The females, I'm not just feeding anything willy nilly. I'm very, very precise on what I feed them now. Now, again, going back and trying many different diets. Let's just say when I started hatching out mangroves 2 to 3 years ago, I was feeding mice heavy, just
Hmm.
because that was one of the things I can get all the time, and it's something that was working for me. So I would feed my monitors, my females, 10, 15, 20 feedings at a time, to
Yeah.
while she's gravid at one time. And so that you can picture, if that's done 4 or 5 times a week, it's 100 fuzzies already.
Yep.
And that's in just in 1 week. And I was getting to a point where afterwards, even after laying, and she would just be kind of pudgy, really fat. I try to really work that out, what I would do is I would slim them down, throw them in a cage, not really neglecting them, but kind of. It's you're feeding them much less. Now you're even being more strict on the diet. You make them work a little bit more for it. Um, and this is I've kind of had a somewhat of bad luck with having a female essentially double clutching me, feeding her a ton and her not really digesting too well.
Yeah.
That probably had something to do with not being hot enough or not exercising enough. But that was the reason why I have had to change my diet drastically in a way where it benefits them a little bit more. And I'm not exactly using less, but in a way, I'm using less volume but more quality. So if you understand, um, I'm not using 10, 15 fuzzies at a time anymore. I'll use a couple mice and then I'll alternate that with crabs and shrimp and crawfish.
Right.
Those three right there are my key seafood items that I use as far as like heavy shelled crustaceans that have good calcium. That's it. It's something that I've just picked up within the last several months. It's more so of a natural range diet too, where these guys are known to be picking off small little crabs off these these beds of the marshes and stuff like that are in the mud. And um seafood is quite regular diet for animals in the mangroves. That's because that's where they hang out.
Absolutely.
So that's something that I've had to use. Explaining my ratios between like calcium and meat, I'd say it's going to be a little hard because I can't even really pinpoint it, and I use quite a few different things. But if you were to just look at it yourself, me using a bunch of fuzzies, like a handful or fistful of fuzzies, compared to using crawfish and shrimp and crabs, the shell ratio is just much more. So that means the calcium is there, and I don't have to use as what I would say fatty foods because that's what mice are. They're there. They're good for running a cycle and starting it, but not as far as a whole diet. And you can essentially supplement with other things that are beneficial that still do a great job. And
Right.
that's where those three key items come in for me. And what they are is they're providing great amount of food source. Um, it's able to give calciums to the eggs for the females that need it and keeps them lean. So
Yep.
it's basically satisfying everything that I need, and then they're not healthy afterwards. So I've actually had to, sadly, I've had to kill, or I've accidentally killed a couple lizards along the way. Learning this, it does suck, but at the end of the day, it's you got to pick yourself up, kind of dust yourself off, figure out what you did do wrong, or see where you can nip it in the bud and try to adjust from that. Thinking on your toes is what kind of what we're trying to say here. Um, and so
Agreed.
I really feed them differently now than I did 2 years ago. So my diet's kind of crazy now, but it works out really well because the eggs are much more beneficial. They look like it's benefiting from what I've changed. Um, so yeah. Now,
Yeah.
what about you, man? As far as like, what you've come up to doing after, I think you've been doing it for now, what, a couple years, right? And I know
Right.
you mostly do dwarfs and mostly Australian stuff, but I just don't want to like lump a certain diet to specific animals because Australian animals can kind of pound it, and they
Oh yeah.
they don't really have a ton of problems, but these Indo species, it's a little bit more delicate. So I just kind of want to see what you do.
Yeah, well, wow. Well, I will say a little history on all that is when I began with the first group of the Acanthurus. It was mainly roaches, dusted roaches, which they did absolutely fine on. I know there I had a buddy at the time who was had a huge colony basically going on, and um, I had a whole operation going. So I would just get my food from him for the
Yeah,
most part. I knew exactly what he was feeding them. And, in 8 months, these animals basically on that diet, just mainly roaches and maybe an occasional pink every now and then. Um, basically had eggs in the ground within 8 months of them starting their own life. So we've done that. We've also done a group of acanthers also on primarily meal or superworms, and kind of just some experiments. And lately, with another group that we're raising up, we're doing primarily egg. Um, and there's been some adjustments we've had to make as far as supplementation, calcium, and whatnot. But it seems almost like with acanthus, anything will work. They're very opportunistic feeders, and you get them going. So you can offer them a wide range of things. Now, when it comes to reproductive events in the females, however, I do start when you kind of get a feel for when your animals going through that cycle. You mentioned the pre-swell, basically. If I can get on that, then I know, okay, I'm really going to start offering her a varied diet, more than I usually do, just as a staple. Um, and I'll make sure she's getting not only rodents, bugs, eggs. I'll offer her fish. I'll offer her that nasty concoction I was talking about.
Yeah,
Just trying to get different items into her that she can use, um, and more looking at it as like, what is she eating throughout the week rather than just that day. And so if I look at it like that, then I'm trying to get those different food items so her body can pull throughout the week from those different sources whatever she needs to. And hopefully the whole idea is that I'm giving her something well rounded that she can use. And oftentimes when she's going through that, uh, I'll see her and the male lock up. They'll be down breeding for a couple days, so they might not eat for a few days
yeah,
when they're in that stage. And I don't bug them too much. I make food available. A lot of it does go to waste, but I want it there in case they need it. And then when they separate, and she starts to get that pear shape, then
yeah,
I'll start hitting her with hopper sized mice, or about the biggest rodent that I think she could take comfortably without too
yeah,
much effort. Because I want her to get that different bone content for the most part in there.
right.
Um, and something I learned from the snake guys is just dusting the back half of an animal, so you can get
Mm.
that monitor to latch onto the front half. They're not going to spit it out or shy away, smelling all that calcium on the
Yeah,
front. And but once they got that animal halfway down, it's not coming back out. So, um, I'll dip the back end of the animal in some extra calcium, something along those lines. And then I use a wide range of food items. I do have a couple of different roach colonies going. I pretty much everybody will take the roaches, except for the some of the Timors that I have. They just don't want roaches. They could care less that they're in there.
yeah,
Um, the Kims will sometimes, if one of them pounces on the roaches as soon as
yeah,
I put it in, they all will. But if that doesn't happen, sometimes they just sit from wherever they're at in the cage
yeah,
and just look at. They do that head cock and just look at them.
yeah, yeah,
And I've had them not touch them, and then I go and throw a couple crickets in there just to see what's going on, and they go wild for the crickets. So I think there is that movement that does entice them to eat. They are very curious animals. The blue trees only want roaches. They don't touch anything else. Well, they did like the grasshoppers I got from you when I decided to feed them off. Um, but
cool.
they'll tackle the roaches no problem. But anything else, they really haven't taken to yet.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep trying some different things, maybe some live.
You know what's weird with me is, so like my Kimberlys, right? I wasn't
Mhm.
really supporting them that. I mean, now when I look at it, I thought I was, but I wasn't supporting them like I should have been. Where um, I don't know. I was kind of going through other people's diets and kind of judging it for myself on what I should do, and people tell me to not feed them mice or things like that, because they're an insectivore. When I really don't believe that 100% is true as far as the Kimberleys go. I do believe they eat much more small vertebrates as well as
Right.
bugs, not just vertebrates, but as well as bugs. So what I did poorly last year was, instead of sticking to my normal thing, feeding chopped and minced mice and egg and chicks and stuff like that, and grasshoppers, I went with mealworms and dubias, and they would eat them, but not in with vigor. So they would eat some of them, and I don't think that they got enough nourishment from just eating those bugs.
Yeah.
Um, and so what's crazy is that I didn't really get good eggs from them at all, really. And then once this year started going off, I started having some lay, and I think I kind of showed you where I had a female just kind of just drop eggs all over
Yeah.
within a couple cages, and um, I tried to put her in a nesting area, and really she was having some bounce back issues just from laying those infertils, scattering them and stuff. So um, I really had to get her back on her feet as soon as I can, just so that way we could keep up with the normal routine, and we don't have to wait too long for her to recoup. And what I did was just put rodents back into her diet, put chicks and eggs back into her diet, and her bounce back has been a lot better. And I'm not feeding as much, or I'm not trying to feed them. And I don't know. I think the roaches, they'll have a couple, but they're not gonna vigorously eat the whole bowl.
Right.
And so, don't get me wrong, I still do offer insects, and I still offer like grasshoppers and such, but not as much as far as like 70 or 80% of the diet. It's more like 20 to 30%, while the rest is still mice, chicks, and eggs.
Yep.
And that's been able to have them bounce back a lot faster, and me saving my animals from having to go through so much stress afterwards.
Yeah,
Um,
I've had to learn a few of those lessons.
yeah. Now, you know, uh, I kind of wanted to go back a little bit, and as far as when I'm getting into breeding, and then when I'm not.
Hmm.
My diet is also then again different. Now we're talking about adults, but it's two different, I guess, schedules, or two different routines that I'm normally kind of implementing with each of the sexes. Now the male, I'm still really doing light feedings and kind of just maintenance feeding on him, keeping him, somewhat lean and healthy, right? Now
Hmm.
the female is basically gonna go through, like I did this year, from the end of December, January, and February was enough time for them. And once March started cracking into gear, bam, it's just March was a slightly starting to get warmer. So I didn't change any lights. Like I told you, I wasn't really fighting my weather anymore. And I was using it, and really just as the days got warmer, the cages got a little warmer, and
Right.
the room gets a little warmer, and it doesn't change anything for me other than actually, I mean, it does change, but I'm not really changing anything at all. I'm just naturally watching it do it on its own. And so when March started to crack off here, the days are a little bit warmer. My animals just went from not eating to bam, just hounding food now. I wanted to wait until April, but they were already having
Not
their
gonna let.
own thing. Yeah, they were doing their own thing already, and so I feed my females very, very differently. It's then again from being what I was as a juvenile, and then now figuring out the sex of these animals, and then feeding them that way. Um, getting into breeding season and getting actually viable eggs, or getting a female to be pinpointed on her schedule, right? If my female was fat and essentially so bloated all the time, for one, it's unhealthy, but I wouldn't be able to see when she was actually going through the swell, because
Hmm.
she'd be so fat regardless. And so when they're a little bit leaner, it's a lot easier to what you then would call, what I call, count the days, because then I can pinpoint, all right, this is her going through this vitellogenesis stage where they're going through the swell, eventually basically developing the ovum, right? And so you're really now counting the few days on when they're going to start to breed, and
Right.
then you can then start to feed much more. Your animals are going to start telling you, or they're going to start rushing the cage for more food. The female will just hit the tongs a lot more. You'll notice the vigor that she has when it's actually time. And then from the times where I was not really feeding so much, now that's been a couple months, I've hit that the part where they're starting the cycle, then getting into the cycles when bam, they're just eating so much and much more. So your females, as far as diet goes, it's going to vary. I really, for anybody that's out there that has females that are laying on their own, what I kind of do is pinpoint it when they're going through their natural season to lay anyways. So if you can get an idea, like my animals lay heavily between November all the way through April almost, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where that's the in a southern hemisphere, that'd be the greatest time for them to lay because that's the whole breeding season, and that's why you see from end of fall, wintertime, and spring, a ton of people are having monitor lizards just lay eggs right now, whether they're a breeder or not. And so
Right.
you want to look around everywhere on the internet or just calculate people on how many have laid this time of the year. There's a ton. And so, well, if you want to start to say that November or the end of fall was your time frame to kick off, then really summer and fall is when you prepare. So I literally have to prepare a diet regimen or diet routine from months way in advance, just so I can get cracking on the actual season that's going to be landing, which is several months away. That's how I've been able to kind of stay up with it. I was a little bit lost coming into this year, and really trying something new where I wasn't fighting the weather and I wasn't feeding heavily, because last year I was just feeding as much as I could and seeing if I can do anything. But this time I'm more so of pinpointing it, me being in charge, me being strict about the diet, and worrying about, all right, am I going to be feeding too much right now? I got to actually bite my tongue. I have to, hold off from wanting to feed, even if I see them out. They actually have to not eat at all for these next couple months, man, and just hold off. And so then
Right.
once I got to feeding, bam, it just triggered many different females. They're all swelling. I've probably got about 3 different clutches, and we're only March, April now. So, I can just wait for the other females to go, and then gonna be feeding them the same. And
I think
that's
it's
how
one of the gifts in captivity we have is kind of to be able to steer them, so to speak, towards what you want. You can, to some degree, put them on your program.
yeah, yeah. So, I find that very, very beneficial to give my animals a little break, and then they're essentially not eating, even though this is a whole thing about diet and stuff. It's the right times to feed, when not to feed, because there are times when you're just feeding too much.
Yeah. I've had
Now,
some fat females before that really
yeah,
don't help anybody if they are not burning off that fat. Now, there's different ways to do that, of course, or to help them do that. But as you've experienced, a fat female can cause a lot of problems.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's heartbreaking because you're, um, it's just you're watching the animal dwindle, and there's not a whole lot you can do. Um, I've had that happen a couple times where it's it's the animal going through its normal biology,
Mhm.
normal ways of life, essentially developing and going through a reproductive stage. If you cannot support this in terms of support, I mean either feeding heavily, allowing it to have a nesting area and then dump those eggs, or actually not feeding so heavy, have her sort of reabsorb that a little bit, kind of get back to a slim, and that slim will let you know just how much you really should be feeding it to get it to trigger or not.
Yep.
It gives you a basically eyeball of, all right, if I feed just this much, she's gonna stay lean and not really do anything at all. But if you kind of go and feed heavy all of a sudden after that lapse of not feeding, she's probably going to be triggered into a cycle just because now she has so much more abundance in food and fat and energy, essentially.
Yeah.
um, and so those are some things. Now there's um as far as I'd say many different ways to get your animals to, we're reaching into the whole breeding aspect right now, because this is what we do during breeding. So for anybody that's got beginner animals and you're just starting off yourself, this may not apply to you a whole bunch, but when your animal is 2 to 3 years old, or it's now a year and a half, and bam, it all just all of a sudden started laying, you would then, I would hope you kind of keep a sort of memory or log of when they went through this whole productive thing. Even if you take a picture, save it, get the details, or you know, have the date on there so you remember it later on. I take a ton of pictures. I don't write anything down, and I'll go back to when I took the pictures. That gives me the timestamp, and then I start counting days.
I do the same thing. Yep.
That's kind of what I'm doing. Um, I wish I had a little bit more organized, but that's just how I'm freely doing it right now. And um, when you get to a point of you have your own females or your own pairs of animals, you're going to have to think about more strategically how you're going to be doing things. And so, yeah, hopefully this helps you guys, and you can apply it to when you guys get your own girls in the future. It happens all the time. Everybody, because when you buy a baby animal, there's not really knowing what the sex is, and so you end up with a girl, and you want to be able to support it well enough.
Right. You bring up a good point too. We mostly talk in the terms of supporting animals for reproduction, and that's because of how we're keeping our goals and what we want to do. There are the keepers out there that just have a pet animal. That's something totally, you can just support that animal to keep a healthy body weight on it. And when you only have the one animal, you can monitor that yourself, so to speak, and just try to keep a healthy weight on them. And males, I would say it's a little less important than females, because even lone females can go ahead and give you clutches of eggs.
Yeah. So you
So
just want to be supportive.
right. And other things you're looking for to know that you're giving your animal the right kind of nutrients, that I've seen or that I've had to experience is just recently I had that juvenile animal. I think I sent you a picture of, Kai, that could kind of bend over its own spine when just going
Oh
around
yeah.
its cage. And
Right.
obviously that's a slap to the face. And I need to get that calcium up. What I was
Right.
doing was not supporting that animal. Now, fortunately, it's a fixable problem at this point.
Right.
It didn't get too far, but I have seen animals that they did not have enough calcium. Well, with my Kimberly Rock female, she gave me that first great clutch, and that was actually her fourth clutch. And
Yeah.
so I had a lot of things going on in life with my job. I was away a lot, and I wasn't supporting her after that. Now, I think there was also part of me that didn't expect her to go for another one, and she went right in. It's like from laying to maybe a week in between to going starting that cycle probably again, or at least that's what it seemed like. And I wasn't supporting her, so now she's gravid, and she was pulling on her own resources so much. I was starting to see those. They're like seizures, basically. If you've ever seen them or
Yeah.
you've ever experienced them, you know what I'm talking about.
Very light twitches, right?
Right. And
Yeah.
a real clear sign that she is deficient, in calcium mainly.
Yeah.
And well, it was a kind of a heartbreaking thing. She also had some other things going on. Something had basically eaten a hole in her,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I remember you
uh,
showing me that.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we got through that. We got through any signs of infection, but because of my what would I say?
Absence.
Neglect. Yeah, my absence and
Yeah.
my neglect, she passed a couple of eggs that were in real bad shape and ultimately ended up passing egg bound.
Yeah.
So yeah, of course that was heartbreaking. She was a great girl. She was there ready to do her part, and she doesn't have the choice to run out there and grab all the nutrients she needs out in the wild. She's in my care. And man, that was a hard lesson to learn. So,
Yeah.
but it's an important one. And hopefully now I can share with you guys some of these signs.
Right.
And like I
Now,
said,
I mean, you bring up also a good, a good point as far as like what we're actually feeding as far as supplementation and
Mm-hmm.
how healthy some of the animals are being fed. You know, I kind of want to bring up something where um, we'll break it down after I say it, but whole foods or whole
Yeah.
food animals or whole prey items isn't exactly enough. Okay,
Yeah.
because if we take the term whole food, it just basically means the whole animal, whatever size it is, it's the brain, gut, fur, skin, all that content, and as far as the meat and calcium goes, it's all that content, and essentially that helps the whole well-being of your animal. um, but pinkies and fuzzies are also whole prey items,
Mm-hmm.
and day-old chicks and day-old quail are also whole prey items, but they don't have enough sustenance in them to, I would say, keep your animal from or helping your animal develop good, strong bones. Don't get me wrong, I used to use all those. I still do, but I make sure I dust the heck out of them just because
Right.
um, I used to just think, all right, I'm going to use whole prey items, and because it's got some bone in it and things like that, it should be fine. But these baby animals that you're feeding, no, I'm sorry, the monitors you have, but the little tiny things that you're feeding them that are babies, like baby mice and baby chicks and baby quail or whatever you're using, the bone content, it hasn't been developed yet. So you're not feeding a ton of calcium there. You're just feeding more of meat than anything. It's meat and fat. That's a good thing to have part of the diet, but you're missing that dense calcium ratio, where
Mm-hmm.
like a large mouse would have heavy bones in it. A rat would have heavy bones in it, and I kind of did the same thing where I just used pinkies and fuzzies and chicks and stuff because, for one, they fit well for my size animals, so they would just have to eat a couple of them, and I didn't have to cut anything up. Now I gotta go through my way and I cut everything up from a big size.
Right.
So I use good bone all the time, and I use big rats. Now I don't feed my 3 foot lizards a big jumbo rat, but I cut it up into a ton of little pieces. The bone density inside the big jumbo rat is just much more comparable than a mouse, even an
Yeah.
adult mouse. And so it's just much more dense. And then compared to chicks and birds, we know that chicks and quail have just essentially less dense bones. Birds in general, because they have to fly or they need to flutter, and so if you had heavy bones and you're trying to fly, it's just not going to work. So we just know naturally that bones in birds are just a little bit more lightweight, less dense, and so there's less there. So anybody that's using things like those, just make sure you're dusting quite regularly. Now, I didn't go through any type of science courses or figuring this out chemically or trying to go through any type of lab to figure out my ratios. I am only judging by my eggs that I get. No,
Yeah.
not trying to be like cocky and say, "Oh, I'm getting eggs over everybody else." What I'm saying is, when I'm looking at my eggs, the result is great from when I first started. When I first started, I'd have eggs that have what they're called oocytes on them, and I'm hoping I'm pronouncing that word right, but it's spelled OOCYTES. And sometimes when you get eggs, they end up with a bunch of little pores on them or a bunch of
Mm-hmm.
little dots on them. And when I mentioned this in BioWalk to another gentleman on why I was getting eggs this way, he told me that I should up my calcium or use a better liquid calcium than what I was currently using. And what I was doing then was the diet that I was telling you about, where the animals didn't have great bone density,
Right.
and I was only dusting a couple times a week. So I was doing that because people were telling me you can over calcium and you can over calcium and you can over calcium, and then so that would scare me. And really, listening to somebody else messed up my own animals instead of me looking at it for myself when I would get the eggs. And so I started doing that. I started stopped listening to other people and started going with, all right, this is facts in front of me. I have poorly looking eggs in front of me. What am I going to do better? Buy these eggs and buy these lizards. And so I then started adding more calcium, dusting much more, added UVB, basically supporting my females much better. And
Hmm.
the turnaround for the next clutch right after was what I wanted: smooth, pearly white, not soft or anything like that. I got really good looking eggs,
Right.
even the duds that came out look good, and so um, me looking at my eggs at the end of the day, or at the end of every time I have to think on my feet and switch up, the me figuring out and realizing, all right, my bone density needs to be much more. All that stuff really helped out, and getting my clutches now. That's my only goal, is to see beautiful eggs, and if I don't, I'm gonna have to really go back to the drawing board a little bit and figure out, all right, this is what I'm gonna do better. This is I think is the issue.
Not to get too off topic, but you're making me think that we could do a whole show just on eggs themselves and cover kind of in more in depth what you're talking about now, but also the semen production in males with temperatures and how all those things work hand in hand. But then also, as you've experienced a lot, your Partho eggs
Yeah,
that didn't need any male to begin with. So, wow, there's a lot to cover just in that. But yes,
yeah,
you know, I think diet has a lot to do with how, well, of course, how the female can go through that entire process and make viable eggs. Um, and I think, there's been a few times when, as I was learning things, I was learning not only the females and how they cycle, but I was feeling things out for myself, trying different food items at the time that, I definitely noticed in direct relation to food how much a clutch would increase, mainly with my main acanthus girl. You know, she's I've had her the longest, so it's easiest to tell and easiest to kind of create a mental chart of what she's doing. I've had clutches that I had one viable egg, now up to 10 viable eggs, some infertile clutches, and I get to kind of backtrack on when, where, what was I doing, what was I feeding her, and adjust as necessary. And I think that's one of the reasons why they are recommended as a good beginner monitor.
yeah.
Um, is
Great for the
they're
learning curve. Yeah,
yeah, they're very forgiving too. Where you do something like that with an animal like a Kim,
it'll die.
yeah,
It'll die. It'll die
bye bye.
tomorrow. Yeah,
So don't take that for granted. If there's listeners out there and you want to get into monitors, of course you can start with whatever you want. Um, but there's definitely lessons you can learn with a more forgiving animal, such as an Aki,
yeah,
that you can take into the future of all your other species that you're going to keep. Now, I will say this too: Akis can kind of make you lazy because what works for Akis doesn't necessarily work for
yeah.
everybody else. They're
Right.
so forgiving, you can be a little
And
sloppy.
yeah, that's what I was, doing with the Kimberleys, is kind of just setting them and forgetting them, right? And I wasn't really thinking about them as much, or just thinking, all right, this is going to do for them. They're dwarf monitor. They kind of are are pigs, and they're easily to breed, right? And
Hmm.
um, now they breed easy, but longevity is
Right.
is the key. And how well they can breed. And sure, one clutch, most I'll consider that myself too. Is one clutch, you're lucky. Two clutch, you get in there. Consistency, three, four, five times. That's what you want.
Yeah.
And then into 10 years, or sure, if you can really get a female to really go that long, great. But most people are kind of getting one or two clutches and then diving out, or they
Right.
end up with some issue. And I've actually been on the line of this, where Alan was helping me literally all last winter with my mess ups, and we're just kind of going back and forth on what I was doing wrong. And even until February, I didn't know what the heck I was doing yet. I was literally, all right, I have to figure out, why am I getting such poor eggs? How come this is happening? And basically switch from there. And I got my mega ray bulbs in, got my UV in, got my calcium up, got my everything up. And so, yeah, man, it's
Only because I was about 9 months ahead of you killing animals and learning those lessons that I could even have something to share with you, as far as adjustments that worked. And
yeah,
hey, you're doing great now. They look great, got some
yeah,
great.
yeah. I'm hoping everything follows through with because I mean, until you sent me your mail, I was done with Kimberly's. I
Yeah.
was essentially kind of almost pulling out, getting ready to sell the rest of the what I had, and move forward with the male with the messed up tail. And man, I was just really almost out, but I realized, all right, I still got these animals. There's no quitting yet. There's these females that are still, they're still my pets, and let's see where this goes. And man, your male's been doing great. So,
Oh, it's a pack
he's
now. You can't go anywhere. You can't give up. There's no
yeah,
giving
yeah,
up.
yeah. And your male he's real gentle. I like him,
Yeah.
man. He's not a jerk, or he's not like too pestering with them eating. Like, he'll let them eat,
Yeah.
um, yeah, so he's actually pretty nice, I would say. And when I can go into the cage and I can literally rip him out the cage, and he'll be like, "All right, let's hang out, man."
Yeah.
And yeah, I like him as far as the Kimberly goes. I've never seen one that nice. So
I have to say his babies are the same way. They
yeah,
are gentle, unless I'm, going right in to grab them. But if I go into their cage and I need to move stuff around, they don't really move. They just watch me do what I need to do. And I mean, I'm
yeah,
right next to them. So I've been kind of, brushing a hand against them and doing little things. I might grab a cricket and show it to them, let them eat it. And yeah, they're actually really great animals. And
yeah.
I don't know to the same degree that I can do that with any other. No, there's a few individuals, but all of those babies for the most part are just like that. And it's something I hope continues, as these, it looks like, uh, fingers crossed, it looks like I have 2.2. So, hopefully we can
So
really nail those down and go from there. But
yeah, man, I don't know. I know you got your Kimberlys when they're a little older, right?
yeah, they were adults already. So when I
Yeah,
got them, the female, she had already had 3 clutches. That same year that I got her. Um, and so she was a new mom to all that. That was her first year breeding. That male is a little bit older. I
yeah,
think made the rounds a little bit, but I still think he was maybe 2 years old. Um, so and he's a stunner. I love that
yeah.
look of that animal. So I'm glad you
You
get.
know,
So
I recommend you raise your girls
yeah,
a little longer than just 12 months. Maybe
yeah,
like 15, 18, 20 months, until like they really get to, you allow them to really be going through breeding. I mean, I I I basically waited for my girls, even though I had some issues into that year, but I waited until they're a little bit older, maybe 18, 24 months, until I really put a female in there. I actually had the male for a little bit, but I didn't throw him in until like I waited maybe closer to 2 years old, as on seeing if they were up to size. And one of my girls, the oldest one, stayed small, and so that's why
hmm
I also waited. But I didn't really. I do hear a lot of scary things of Kimberly's. People falling in love with this animal, and trying to do what they think is right, but really end up killing them. And I don't want to do that. I really, I know monitors can go 8 months, 10 months, 12 months. Some females can really get cracking at that year age.
right,
um, and I kind of really don't recommend that when you get these new girls up and going. Maybe wait a little bit longer, just to hold off on eggs and get some size on them first, really. And
right.
that way, when they do process and they do pass eggs, it's a lot easier since they're a little bit older.
Well,
um,
with that too, the reason I think this is actually really important is because that female, she basically, when she died egg bound, she was on her fifth clutch that year. And
oh
so,
wow.
I mean, that's insane to know that she's pulling that much from her body, from her resources made available to her to do 5 clutches in a year. So yeah, I want them not fat, but a little tanky,
Yeah,
uh, big boned and ready for something like that. Because I don't get to pick how many clutches they have. I've had females even after I take the male out. That Tristis female I was telling you about, she did that to me. I thought I was going to
yeah,
cut her short by taking the male out, and she just kept going. So they were infertile, but it taught me, okay, well, that's not going to work either. I need to be on it. I need to be supporting them not only as we're going into that, but the time in between when they are done laying. I still like to offer that hopper sized mouse to the females, and right after right after laying, if not their first meal, the second meal, they're pretty ravenous, so they're ready to work it
yeah.
down and get it down, and
Yeah,
then keep
luckily, most of mine are ready to go at like right after they lay.
right.
You get a little bit of drink of water and bam, food.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For the most part, I had a little scare with that sand monitor over over Christmas. I was gone for a little bit doing holiday things, but she came back around. She looked horrible though. Oof, that scared me.
Yeah,
Um, but yeah, a little bit of water, very important. Also, we're talking about food and diet, but having water. Your monitors might not use water all the time, but
right.
especially females going through that reproduction.
Drinking is
Um,
great. Drinking
yeah.
is good. Yeah. So, I guess the kind of I don't know if we're closing this off yet, but water. Um, I have that that bin for them
Hmm.
to kind of communally use, and they jump in and out of there. All my monitors kind of have a slightly bigger bowl just for them to jump in and get cool or whatever, right? Take a crap in, but
Yeah.
really, I keep little bowls everywhere. So those I have maybe in every cage a couple extra little tiny bowls that they can't get into. It's elevated, so they can't kick dirt into it really. So it stays cleaner. I'll even have it hung up in the corner of a cage, and I'll fill that up periodically where that's their drinking ability, and they have
Hmm.
good clean drinking water. I think a lot of us, all of us, because monitors are so dirty with that water aspect. You put in a new bin in there, and later 10 minutes, it's full of mud and dirt and
Right.
whatever they checked in it, or they took a crap. So realistically, drinking clean water in some of our cages isn't available until you actually change the water again. So having those little cups of water, because you're not always going to be having to spray, or you're not even sorry, you're not going to always be able to spray them because you're not always going to be available. So that
Right.
whole pendulous water, even though they do drink from that when you spray them, you want to make sure that they still got some standing water sitting around that's clean and good for just drinking.
Yeah.
um, so yeah,
What
little
I've done as a oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm
no, no,
interrupting.
good, no, you're good. I finished. I just finished.
Um, what I've done is, those little deli cups you get like ranch dressing in. I'll go pick up a few hundred of those, and I found at the local pet store the little animal bowls, basically the right size for those little cups to fit in. So that way, I'm not worried about cleaning dishes or bacteria growing in there. I can just rip that cup out, put another one in with water. I know a lot of
Yeah,
the snake guys do that, and a
yeah,
lot of the keepers do that. So,
right. That's what I do. It's one cup hung in the corner,
hmm.
and that's a tall cup, right? And then
Yeah,
I just empty out. I pull out a little cup, and I toss that whenever I need to, and then I'll refill it. Or yeah, it's I have a couple of those sitting in my thing. So yeah, man. Is there by chance? Is there anything else you wanted to cover? I kind of went over that list that we had, and I believe.
yeah. Well, I don't know what. I guess we could talk about just some. When we were talking about doing this show, it really made me think a lot of the stuff I was doing, but I never really thought it out or why I was doing it. It's just some of the things I've developed after a couple years of keeping these animals and going through the
Yeah,
cycles with them.
right.
But I guess you might have a male if you keep your animals in a group, pair or more. You might have a male that's really dominant when it comes to food. Um, I have a few of those, and some of the tricks that I've been able to use is lately just figuring this out actually is instead of feeding them, let's say the sand monitors, instead of thawing out a bunch of mice for all of them, well, that male, he's bigger than the female. He's going to rip those mice down without a second thought, where she
Yeah.
might have to do just a few more seconds of work. But I mean, if you thaw out 15 mice for these animals, well, maybe not that many, but let's say 10 mice, he might get 7 of them before she's on her third, and she's the one I'm
Yeah.
worried about.
Yeah.
So what I've done recently is I'll take a rat
Yeah.
and I'll thaw out a rat and I'll throw that to him first. And it's going to take him a while, but he's so food dominant, he doesn't want her to have that rat. So he runs off with it, and he's in the
Yeah.
corner pushing it against the wall, trying to work it down his throat. And then
Yeah.
I can feed her a smaller whole food item, and I know that she's getting 5 or 6 mice, especially in that time when I know she's going to start that cycle. Honestly, she's probably already started the cycle. I'm just seeing what I can actually see
Yeah.
looking at her. And so those little tricks I've learned a lot of times when I've noticed, I don't know if you've noticed the same thing, but after I have a female lay or during that whole process, I'll actually have the males go down for a while. They stay hidden, let her do her thing, and actually will stay out of the way for the first couple days as she gets that food or as she gets that weight back on her from the food.
Yeah. For me, so since I have pretty food aggressive males as well, um, I take out the male and he sits in a bin while she gets to eat really well.
Mhm.
I occasionally do a slightly larger item, but the biggest stuff I really got in my freezer are chicks. So that's only going to keep him busy for so long. Yeah, and he's so motivated on the tongs. I can give him a whole plate of food, but he's gonna go where the action is because he's so
Yeah.
used to the tongs. And so I just take him out now and I shove him in a bin, and he's gonna stay in the bin for a couple hours because um, I just don't want him to rush in and out or have to, I don't know, just he's just gonna be in that bin just eating and kind of mellowing out while that female has opportunity to eat in peace.
Right.
Um, I've it's just so much headache back and forth where I'll have to watch the male. He's gonna be done with his food. He's gonna go over to the female. She really needs this. So if she misses even one or two of this irregularity
Mhm.
in her normal intake, then there can be a mishap with the eggs or something like that, or in her bounce back right now, right? So uh, I would like her to basically get every meal that I offer her. And so the males come out, they sit on the floor for a couple hours in a bin, eating their own thing. And then whenever I feel she's done and she's had her drink, I'll shove him back in. That way, there's less conflict. But yeah, man, I got the males are a headache, especially when it comes to really feeding for the female. When
Yeah.
it's time and I only have to feed her a little bit, or let's say she's positioned really well in a cord tube and like he's hiding, then I'll kind of try to sneak in some food for her. But even then, that's annoying because I have to hide from him. Like, oh damn, like this male, he's so like my male Jody, man. He's actually gotten on my nerves a few times where it's like I'm trying to feed her and. I've already defrosted this. I'm not going to defrost anything else right now because that's just going to add another 15, 20 minutes or even longer, however long it takes to
Yeah.
defrost. And so, yeah, man, I just I just pull them out now. So sometimes I throw them. Sometimes I have an extra cage for them, but really I just now because there isn't any extra space too much. He's in a bin when she has her downtime, and that
Right.
recoup time too. No one goes back in probably for weeks. So she's got her own okay recoup system.
Mhm.
Uh, that clutch that I just dug out, right? It's from the same female that laid a month ago. So
Yeah.
yeah, so this is a back-to-back clutch again.
Yeah.
Um, I'm really trying to figure out just how to go. So if I guess you want to consider all the stuff from last year, it was like summer skipping because they were just so hot. But then I cooled them down. The whole fall and winter kind of chilled on its own, and then I gave them an actual cool down when it really started to get cold in California. We had a late winter, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, pretty late winter, little rain, very little rain here. And so, yeah, man, I think I don't know what it is. It's the weather, the rain, the pressure, but it always coincides with that, you know.
Yeah, it's
Um,
time.
yeah, it's time, and so
Now,
uh,
do you on that real quick, just do you notice that if you have the same female, let's say she gives you 3 or 4 clutches, do you notice a difference between the clutches from the first one throughout, the 3 or 4 clutches? Do you notice they improve, or are the
um,
first couple clutches
yeah,
better? Do they
yeah.
trail off?
John was mentioning to me. He was like, "Yo, if you can, um, the first one might not always be a bunch of great eggs, and
Right.
they basically got that out of their system, and then the second one should be great."
Right.
Um,
That's what I've been seeing a lot.
so um, I've had that happen on a couple occasions with different monitors and different species, even where, all right, like one I was telling you about, where the Kimberly laid. I think I was messaging you in January and February, right?
Hmm.
And then she went ahead and laid a really great clutch of 6.
Yeah.
So like, damn, like you just gave me all that headache, and I really didn't think I was going anywhere. For a while, dude, I was thinking I wasn't going anywhere with these Kimberlys. Like, damn, I just went 2 steps back, and I thought I was getting eggs, and now I'm just getting shit. So, all right, I got to
Yeah.
figure this out. Um, and man, it's almost night and day with how the eggs are turning out.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I'm hoping it. Um, I have a couple cages that I just need to button up, but I believe after I saw them locking up again just a couple days ago, so I revamped the soil because she can go within 15 days, 20 days of after breeding. It's pretty fast for dwarf monitors sometimes, and
Hmm.
um, I just want to have that nesting area ready, so I revamped it, added a little bit of water to it, turned it, made sure that everything was okay, and yeah, man, I don't know. I'm gonna pull her out after. I just leave her on her own, maybe for the summertime, and then put her back in. As much as I do want to breed them, I don't want to see what goes on. I think what I'm getting is enough. I'm not going to be too greedy, and
Hmm.
try to pump more out of her when I can let her chill, and then get some more later on. I just don't want to do what we talked about earlier, where they go through 5, 6 clutches or whatever and pump as much as they can within that time frame. Philip
Yeah.
Guy in the UK, or I believe that's where he's from, but um, he was telling me that his girls easily go through um, a double clutch period within 45, 60 days.
Right.
And so I'm like, damn, that's so fast.
Oh
And
man.
his looks so great. So
Right.
Um, I mean, obviously he's got more than one female, or many of you guys have more than one girl. I only really got one girl working with me, so I'm really trying to not kill her, and so probably if she does lay again and she's not cycling herself and taking her own breaks, then I'm gonna have to take a break for her and yeah, pull her out.
That's where I was saying I did try that with the Tristis. She went anyway, so it's
Yeah,
making me think
that's
about
what I'm
things a
scared.
little.
That's
Yeah,
what
it's
I'm
a little.
scared about. Alex told me to just keep them together
Yeah.
because if I mean, because she can basically lay a bunch of infertils and then go through the same thing where,
Right.
yeah. So I'd rather her lay fertile eggs and, yeah, not have to go through the mess.
On
So
that same topic, I just I posted on it on my Facebook page and for the Origins Reptile, and then
yeah,
also on my Instagram. But yeah, this my main Aki girl talking about how this happened. Her and the Tristis both my main Tristis girl both bred in January. Towards
yeah,
the end of January, about the 29th and 30th. And
Yeah.
then they gave me both infertile clutches
Yeah.
around the, I'd say 19th, 20th of February. Now, as you know, I had some stuff going on where I keep them, where I had to move a bunch of things around into another space, and
Yeah.
the ambience dropped about 15 degrees. So that I definitely think played into a lot of this. But it was then March 13th was the final day. There was 3 days of breeding that I saw in the Ackies, and so we're talking. She laid on February 19th, and then on March 13th, she's breeding again, and then laid for me on, let's see, March 29th. So there's only a little bit of time in between those clutches.
Couple
She looks
weeks.
great. Yeah, she looks great, fortunately. And the truth is, as soon as I get back, I got to really start feeding her a lot of the stuff we've been talking about today, because it's very possible she's going to be going again. And I don't know if there's going to be a fourth after that. Sometimes that's happened too. And I just got to keep at it and let until she takes the break.
Yeah.
So
Right.
all I can do is sit there and support her and give her these good meals. It's it's a learning curve. You learn real quick.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's you gotta be there. I mean, you gotta be there or have food or take that time when they've just finished basking and it's that morning period where they're hungry. Get in some food for her. Let her get some nutrients in, and yeah, man, it's the best thing to do because the consistency while you're trying to breed is the high thing. Like you can kind of leave lone animals sitting for a few days without eating, but when it comes to the actual being together and breeding, it's just so much more energy
yeah,
that they need. Yeah.
and you touched on this a little bit, but I do a lot more maintenance feeding with my males. They don't get it as good as the females. That's the honest truth.
Yeah,
And
they don't.
I keep them on the thin side. I try to keep them on the thin side through different tactics, and
Right.
if I have to take them out or just make sure that use some kind of visual physical barrier in the cage to make sure the female gets the appropriate food. I just need them to perform their task, and you've
Yeah.
seen those big fat males that they don't do anything.
Right. They just sit
Um,
around.
right. So I do keep them on a tighter food schedule than the female. The females have a lot more opportunity to eat different things than my males do. Sorry,
Right.
guys, that's just how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I think, man, is there anything else you want to touch on as far as? And believe me, I'm sure we'll talk about this in other topics, and we'll hit on this again as we experiment with different things. So,
Yeah.
um,
I think we covered a pretty good amount. You know, I think
yeah,
from babies to breeding and females and males and when part of the year and the fasting part. I mean, I think we kind of also covered the. I mean, we should probably be more definitive on our whole maintenance fees. So we joke around and calling it neglect, and we joke around and call it kind of like we're really just. It is kind of that you're essentially not feeding, but really it's not neglect at all. You're being even more strict and going through periods where you're not feeding very much at all.
mm-hmm,
And really, this is just people want to. I mean, in the back of our heads, you would normally be feeding them much more, and you would
right,
normally be feeding them often and a ton of food, even or just quite regularly. But you're really now going to pick a date, and you're going to then go this long of a period, whether it's a few weeks or a month and a half, or you're 2 weeks out of 1 month in a whole month in another month and then 2 weeks part of another month going back up in weather. And so that's you're down and you're kind of staying leveled at this at this amount of food or even no food for a month period, and then going up a couple weeks where you're slowly starting to feed more. And
mm-hmm,
and those times where your maintenance feeding is really key. It's just feeding enough where you're obviously seeing the animal still got good muscle tone, It still has good strength in it. It's not like lethargic or limp when you pick it up. It's vibrant. It's still fine. It just looks like the wild monitors, where man, they look like they haven't been eating, but their tail base is so thick because they're still
Yeah.
hydrated, still healthy. The legs and the arms are keeping weight and keeping. I guess they're just being sustained as far as muscle tone and everything like that.
Yep.
If you notice your animals start to dwindle and it's not eating, and you're not feeding it a lot, and you're basically seeing the tail compress and stuff like that, you're going to need to do a little bit more on the maintenance. So you'll find a balance on just how much to feed. But really, the animal is very hungry and it wants to eat a ton, but you really shouldn't be feeding it during this time. Um, so, so yeah, that's kind of what our, in quotation mark, neglect or maintenance period is.
Oh man, yeah. Now that I think about it, there's so much. We'll probably end here in a little bit, but and when it comes to the Timors and Peacock monitors, and I just put a bowl of food in there and or some food in there and just hope something disappears.
Yeah.
They're a whole another thing for me. I just I can't ever tongue feed them. They don't ever want to play. Um, yeah, I let them eat on their own schedule and just try to offer them various things, and whatever they want to go for is what they go for. They're all growing fine. They're all doing fine, but I have no idea if the males eating more or the females are getting enough. They're hiding away, and I'm just gonna have to hope for the best. So
Yeah. I guess so, and yeah, sometimes I guess with people that have shy animals, right?
hmm
The tongue feeding and stuff like that, it won't even apply to you. You're
right.
really gonna just leave as much food as you can in a bowl, or I'll leave some in a bowl for the male, and the female will be in a quart tube. I'll shove a bunch of chopped stuff in the front of that entrance quart tube, and
Yep.
hopefully she eats her stuff. And really, sometimes I'm not doing any of this strict stuff at all, and I just shove a bunch of food in there, and hopefully they eat. Not all my animals are like that, but there are a couple that really won't touch food if I'm around. So I really gotta leave it in there. And I have a female that would prefer to just eat on her own. She eats slower and she eats more when I allow her to eat slower. So it's not like me coming at her with the tongs every single time she takes a bite. I have another piece ready. She takes her
Yeah.
leisure time, and when it's that time, I pull that male out so she can literally have her 30 minutes or 20 minutes of just slow eating, chilling.
And you
Um,
probably have animals that just naturally they might both be female but eat slower or
yeah.
faster than the other one. You got your own individual personalities at work there too.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Well,
Well, what do we even want to talk about it while we're recording? What we want to talk about next week or for the next show? What do you got rolling around in your head?
man, I was thinking about really getting into the juice already with inviting either our first guest or working towards it, but really getting that either questionnaire out or inviting just another keeper on. I wanted to, you know, the amount of keepers that want to come on, I don't think we're at a short supply at all. So, all
Right.
we'd have to do is just really ask some people. But what I wanted to put I guess, a wanted list out there for is people that are brave enough to come into the hot seat a little bit, ask us a bunch of questions. It's not like a grilling session or anything like that, but it's just you'd be able to put yourself on the mic a little bit, get a little bit comfortable with asking us questions, and we ask you questions, and we kind of just really formulate this for people listening and get an idea on what it's like for both sides. And we want to really have more people understand just some of the new beginning aspects. So what you guys think, how you guys may want to apply some other methods to your current thinking, and what we can do to essentially help you guys. And also you guys are helping us because there's many nuances and aspects that not everybody goes through, and something that we're learning from you, we might be able to apply to something else or apply to our own stuff, or it's just things like that. So it'd be a learning experience for both ends, I think.
Yeah, and just So remember, I did ask Eric about it, and we can have 2 other people on with us, so we're limited in that.
That's
But
still
we can
plenty.
also, yeah, and we can go ahead and collect questions. So if anybody out there has some questions, you can send those to either Kai or myself, and we can kind of keep a list. We'll probably get some doubles of the same questions. And some of the more experienced keepers, you might not have this issue, no problem. But reaching out to those beginners, maybe people thinking about monitors and whatnot. I know over the last, I think, week or so, I've gotten a lot of. We were joking a couple weeks ago about the people hitting me up, and I was like, oh no, it's not been that much of a problem this last week. I've had a lot of people hit me up with different questions. I'm more than happy to help too. So, yeah, I think that'd be a good idea. Let's see if we can get it going. Let's see if we can get some people nailed down. If not, I mean, me and you can just sit here and listen to ourselves talk again. There's so much to cover with monitors that we could tap into easily, but it would be nice to, I think, go that direction and
Cool, man.
get
I'm
some
probably
people asking
gonna
questions.
put a hit out for some people that may want to, just people that are messaging me kind of already to begin with. Obviously, I'm not able to answer all their questions. Maybe I might be able to in the podcast because we'll be able to take some time. I
Yeah.
do apologize to some people. There's only little one me, it's just little old me, man. And I want to be able to help everybody. Don't get me wrong. I've been trying to do every little aspect as far as being available to you, as whether it's on Facebook, on my Instagram, even on TikTok or on my YouTube. I resurrected an old YouTube page just so the YouTube people can, the people that learn from YouTube, and I'm one of those too, where it's like, hey, I just got something new, or I need to figure out how to do this electronically, and I'll go on YouTube. And so there's a big, I guess, a large amount of people that are on there just really trying to reach out to people. And so um, get information and get help. And I've had a couple people message me already just on some of the videos that I posted. So only so many people go on all these different platforms, and I want to make this podcast just because it's definitely a thing where more and more people are getting into podcast listening. It's something that they can drive to, or they drive to work to, or on their free time, and they're just trying to get distracted from what they're doing. And so, this might be a good time for you to just pick up something like this to listen to. Um, and so, reaching out to you guys, I think Alan and I will do our best to help you guys as best as we could. We're typically really available to you guys all the time, other than when we're really busy at work or might be at the crack of dawn. And even then, I'm typically available at the crack of dawn.
Kai, you're
Most
up at all time. I
yeah,
go on the messenger and see that little green bubble on.
yeah, yeah. I'm up at all hours just because I got a lot going on too, and I'm typically right at my phone's reach. So I'm gonna see your message or something like that, and I try to help you. Some things are a little bit more. They take. I got to sit down, and we actually got to go through some stuff, But like there was a gentleman that hit me up about making nesting stuff for him, and I can kind of just I don't want to just sell you or tell you anything. I want to walk you through it and
Right.
make it work for you. I can just say, oh, use a nest bin in sand and soil, but that still is incomplete. I have to explain temperatures and soil structure, soil density, water dense, all that. Like everything is applied, and so it does take a little bit more of science and critiquing and breaking down, but message us and we'd be able to take the time with you and work with you. And hopefully this podcast, we can reach even more
Right.
people at once.
Yeah, we might
um,
answer your question. If we don't respond, we might answer it in the podcast just because there's other people out
yeah,
there. And
we'll
that
have
way we
one of
can
those.
hit a lot of people at once too.
We'll have one of those where we're going to take some of your guys' questions, and it may be a thing where we get a few of these same questions, and we'll basically make a podcast for you guys and go
Yeah.
from there. um, we're going to get to that point too where we'll have just a Q&A session, and we're just answering your guys' questions that you guys shoot in.
All right. On that note, Kai, about them questions, where can they find you?
They can find me just on Facebook or Instagram, but again, like I'm also on YouTube and other stuff now. My typical handle for Instagram is big underscore lizard 103 at yahoo.com. That's big underscore lizard one, the letter O, the number three at yahoo.com. And my YouTube is mangrove mecca. Two different words. Mecca is spelled Mecca. And yeah, on Facebook, I'm just Kai Fan. I would prefer you just refer to me as Kai Fan as well. Not anything else that anybody else calls me, and just the guy with the lizard. And yeah, it's KhaiPhan as in Nancy.
All right. You guys can find me at origins underscore reptile on Instagram and origins reptile on Facebook. And I think all my info is there. You can message me on either platform. And then again, we just want to say thank you to the Morelia Python Network for supporting us in this. That is who is bringing the Monitor Keeping podcast to you guys out there. So go ahead and check them out. You can see them at Morelia Python Radio Network.net. If you scroll down, there's a whole list of podcasts that they're doing. A lot of you might be familiar just with NPR in general, but there's, I think, almost 10 different podcasts in different directions. So they're covering a wide range of reptiles. If you have any other interest, go ahead and check them out. There's a lot of great guys that are doing a lot of good stuff. Also on their website, you can look around. There's a store. There's a newsletter to sign up to. If you like this content and you want to support them, there's also a Patreon that you can find there as well. So yeah, personally, we'd like to thank Eric Burke for all his support and getting this going. I am very much technologically illiterate, so he's been kind of walking me through some things. So
Same here.
Yeah. All right, man. Till next time.
Till next time. We appreciate you guys for listening and everything. And I'll see you later, man. Thank you very much.
Talk to you later.